installed, 20% that are ready, and 40% that are prepared. So if you built a 40 unit, you've got to make 65% of them at least prepared, which means you...
But my question is, what do you think that means in the real world? Like,
For the cost of an actual project.
what, and also, what is that project and where would it be? Like, to me, that sounds perfectly fine. And also, I'm not even sure where something like that would ever be sited in town.
Well,
Well, yeah, I
There's
mean, we
a
can't
lot of
predict the
land.
future, but yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I could see that happening.
I mean, Hannaford's
Right.
just changed owners. A new owner that owns that whole Hannaford's area, maybe they decide they want to develop something there.
Okay,
Right,
so
right.
why is it
Or
a problem
that
if
there
that's
is-
hard?
Right, or
Why
separately,
is that an
separately,
issue?
there's been a push for making more affordable housing in town, and there's a site being talked about that's in the northeast quadrant of 108, 104, but about further from that junction than Riverwoods, that area.
Yeah, again, none of this sounds to me like a situation where we should lower our standards versus being ready to listen to an application for a variance, right, Todd?
Well, the challenge is it's very hard to get a variance. Like there have to be very strict legal parameters in place in order for the ZBA to grant the variance. So if the
But this
rule
is planning level, right? Not CBA level.
well,
The
once
planning board has, the planning board has some authority to waive site plan requirements, so that's also an avenue.
but if it's not written into the ordinance that the planning board can waive requirements, then the avenue for relief is to a different board, which is the zoning board.
Well, that's fine. That's a sentence. Like, I think it's fine to allow the planning board to waive requirements for a thing like this if a plan makes sense.
Right.
Okay, but let's also back up to the point. This ordinance that came in originally wasn't out of, whole cloth created here. I talked to Em last night. So it's like, this was from Lebanon. This was Lebanon's ideas of these percentages, and that's where they came from. So it wasn't like born in this room.
But I haven't heard an alternative proposal as to how to do this ordinance, and to me it sounds like we're actually dealing with the question of whether or not we're rewriting the ordinance or we're recommending what we have.
I like Mike's comment that I think if we can smooth out the framework for this, and then I think we should have a subcommittee that goes through and runs the numbers. And there might be places where you come up with that 40% of parking is going to be given, that's maybe too much. But I would like to see I think we're pretty close to having a workable document. I worry that we're just, by putting a sentence in that says the planning board can overrule this, we're just giving them a headache because we didn't do
That was
our...
just a suggestion.
No,
I'm
but
still trying to
yeah,
get to
right,
the question
But I mean,
of
I
whether or
think
not the structure of the ordinance is okay with people.
So, I mean, I raised this concern, I'll raise it again. I think the creation of a new parking spot is a bit onerous for a family that has teenagers and needs to add a new parking spot, and then to them to have to upgrade their electrical panel because they need to add a new parking spot.
That's an official parking spot. That doesn't
apply
from
to
what I
residential?
understand, apply to it.
I think we got around that last meeting.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
what I put in was that,
Okay,
so it's in the yellow highlight in the thing that I sent you guys. The single-family and duplex dwellings, this ordinance applies to those dwelling types in the following circumstances. An EV prepared spot should be provided one per dwelling in new construction. So that was the new construction, new houses, new duplexes.
that's
And
D.
an EV prepared spot shall be provided when the service entrance panel is being replaced for some other reason.
Okay, so what is section C on applicability?
Section C,
Is applicability.
right, This is
I
when it
know.
would apply.
It's the public, and there's no password.
I use cellular.
There's no password.
Oh, there's no
There's no
There's
public Wi-Fi.
It's the public Wi-Fi. There's
Oh,
a private
right,
and
but-
public.
but-
To the public.
Okay, I don't, maybe.
But it doesn't apply, that's for multifamily, non-residential, commercial.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. The creation of a new parking spot applies for multifamily, but not single family.
See, where the,
Okay.
and the site is zoned multifamily, commercial, other non-residential property.
Okay, sorry. I didn't see that.
Okay.
Oh, and. This, okay.
So my point is there's multiple ways to do an EV ordinance. Like it doesn't have to be laid out the way we have it laid out here. And so my question is the way we have the ordinance laid out right now fundamentally flawed?
Me personally, I'm fine with the way it's laid out. I think we could debate the numbers, right? And I think we should probably write out some examples.
So,
Like, what
so
about-
you think it's just about the
I think it's-
percentages and how much or how
Right.
little?
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. I think we do need some data on how much it costs to provide an EV parking space as opposed to, or EV ready as opposed to something that's not designed just so that we have data to indicate how much this would cost developers to comply with the ordinance.
Well,
I mean, we went over that a bit.
Well, and that's where I was thinking, like, if we're good with the framing of it, and to me, it is about the numbers. We could come up with a couple scenarios, like a condo that's coming with 40 spots, a new house, new construction, and kind of go through the section and say, what if? Like, what if?
Create
this
a
happened?
couple dummy cases.
Yeah, exactly. And then to your point, like, what would that cost? Like, okay, so you'd have one ready, one, whatever the different categories are.
One install.
Yeah, exactly. And then that'll help us, I think, look a little bit more real potentials, right? And again, I'm good with the framing. It's just the percentages. And
I'm under the impression that this is something we were trying to submit this year.
yeah,
It is, I mean,
Okay.
it seems like you're questioning if anybody's, I don't think anybody's said that they don't like the framing.
Well, I'm specifically checking that right now.
I've got no objections to the framing. There are lots of places where we need to talk about the numbers and make sure that they
Yep.
make sense.
Okay.
But the general framework,
One of the
Looks good.
numbers that I think we need to check, not just the number of parking spaces, but the branch circuit. I noticed in the language that you could use one circuit for possibly two spaces. And I was looking, I'm not an electrician, but I think you need a minimum of a 40 amp breaker for a level 2 charger. Unless the two chargers that are imagined in this parking space are smart ones that talk to each other, they're going to be blowing that circuit repeatedly. Because unless, you need a 100 amp breaker for two separate chargers. So I think maybe an electrician can guide us on this, but I think in the language there's something about the branch circuit could serve the requirement for two spaces or something. And I think that might actually not be.
I actually asked for the branch circuit to be sized in accordance with the total amperage of all chargers. I don't know if that made its way in.
Well,
It's not.
It shouldn't be based on a 40 amp.
Yeah.
the
Breaker.
verbiage in level 2 says, talking about a level 2 charger, these units require a dedicated 40 amp circuit.
Right. But then later on, I've forgotten, and I
40
still
amp
can't get
per
into it.
level two.
What is the name of the website? I don't see it. Public?
it should be Durham Public, I think.
Term? It's not coming up for me, so I can't read it. I was
But-
trying to save paper tonight. But somewhere in one of the parking discussions, it says when two EV-ready parking places are required, a single branch service can supply both.
Well, yeah, you're right. So an EV-ready spot, it's the last sentence,
Yeah.
well, second to last, says, for two adjacent EV-ready spots, a single branch circuit is permitted.
Yeah.
I don't think that implies that it would
mine's
be
connected
a
to the
40
private.
amp breaker, because anyone who is installing that would know that it couldn't be a 40 amp breaker.
Well, but I mean, if it's EV ready, so they're not putting the chargers in, right? So it's possible to just make it ready for one, and then somebody comes along later and says, oh, we're gonna hook into this.
I mean, I personally don't think anyone who would be involved in code would interpret that way, but okay. I mean,
I
it's
interpret that as
possible.
meaning you can run one conduit tube out to the site, and one circuit breaker that's gonna feed those two things. But each one's gonna have their own circuit breaker, so I don't know if you can.
Oh, well, I thought it said a single branch circuit.
It does say single branch circuit. It's
So
permitted.
that sounds to me like one wire, because the gauge of the copper has to change when you jump from 40
But
to
according to
80.
code, a branch circuit has to be sized for the total amperage of both branches.
Okay,
Right.
even the potential
Yes.
use, even if it's not
Right.
stated.
That
Right.
totally
Okay.
supersedes anything else. in our
Right, right. We
ordinance.
do need to make sure that that is written clearly in the ordinance, because otherwise people are going to find creative ways to work around it.
I mean, certainly, we could add
Dash, yes.
the electrical inspector to the list of people to review this.
So, again, I'm trying to finish this off. You are good with the structure of the ordinance, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now we can move on to specifics. Because people start using phrases like, well, I think there's a huge problem with large open-ended part of the ordinance, and it becomes very hard to understand exactly how much of a change we're talking about.
Sounds like everybody's good. It's just the
Okay.
numbers. Yeah.
But, so that's the thing. We're worried about the numbers now, right?
So we'll run some
We-
what-if
we-
scenarios.
So what I sent you, I highlighted areas that were still unresolved, that were sort of discussion points. So we could sort of just march through
Yeah.
and just look at the highlighted
Yes.
spots and try to resolve the verbiage stuff. And like I said, come back and deal with the numbers later.
And that's exactly where I was trying to get to.
Okay. So the first item on the second page, under applicability, that Matt was just talking about, was a question about zoning, really, where the EV charging station is allowed as an accessory use in all zoning districts. When the retail charging of electric vehicles is proposed to be the principal use of a lot, then the proposed EV charging station shall be considered an automotive service station for zoning purposes, which I mentioned last time restricts us to the courthouse district right here, present. And the question came up last time with regard, was that Todd's input originally? Todd said no. I did call Michael at the planning office last week and spoke with him, asked if it was his original thing, and he said no. To his knowledge, this was just sort of came in part from Lebanon, and he didn't have a strong feeling, but he said, you know, you can propose whatever you want. And he also made the comment in that this is what you guys might want to be thinking about, is actually doing two things. One is making proposed amendment to the site planning ordinances and also something to the zoning ordinance if we want to talk about that issue separately and discreetly, one way or the other. But it could be left open, like just be moot on it, don't say anything, or, you know, consider that and say, okay, do we really want to restrict that to this zone? Or is that something that, you know, I was talking to Eric earlier out there, that, you know, this new big development that might be taking place out on Route 4, the UNH thing, the West End development, that might be something at some point where maybe that intersection becomes the spot where you want to have, somebody might want to put in an EV charging station that's just, you know, 6 or 7 charging Tesla chargers or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
And,
and the automotive service station seems very restrictive.
yeah,
It
Right.
creates
Just
a lot
right
of-
here.
I thought we suggested at the end of the last conversation that we delete that whole part.
well, we can, but the question was, did the director of planning have an input on that? And I just was related to the fact that he said, no, that wasn't his input, so. He didn't have a strong opinion on it at this point.
All right.
Yeah.
So we could strike it, or we can just, or address it as part
I
of
don't
the
think it
zoning.
makes sense.
I think
I'd strike it.
Strike it.
Yeah, I get rid of it.
Seems like.
So by striking it, we're saying, and I think this is okay, but by striking it, we're saying retail charging of electric vehicles can be done anywhere. Right?
Or maybe you just, I don't know, this is maybe a question for Todd, or certainly going to get back to Michael again eventually, is if you say EV charging stations are allowed as an accessory use in all zoning districts, and don't talk about where the principal use,
Well, that implies that a principal use is not allowed.
okay, so
It
then we should
implies
address.
that it's a special use permit.
Okay,
I mean, I think the word retail should be kept in there because it's very different to have a charging station available to tenants in a housing unit. But if somebody came in and put a level 3 DC fast charger and people are coming every 20 minutes into a residential zone to charge their cars,
Right.
that would be like a service station. And I would not
So-
want that in my neighborhood.
so maybe the answer is it has to be in a commercial zoned area.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I would think
Well,
commercial.
Yeah, if we're going to say anything, that's what we would have to say.
I think we need to think about it carefully. because
Right,
it's a mix-
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
are there
I think we should
situations?
let Todd weigh in on what like policy is for this, because I know this is directly connected to the way the gas stations exist in town.
Right, so I think it's a planning department issue really, but absolutely, this was gasoline alley is what we called it, and because that's where we wanted the gas stations. And
Right.
in effect, we're creating the new version of a gas station anywhere where there's commercial activity. We may or may not want that, I don't know. But that's a big difference from what we have now.
Right.
So to me, from what I think is, do we want to allow landlords and such who are providing parking spaces to tenants to be able to charge their tenants for charging their EVs? Or do we want to make it clear that the only way there's EV charging in town is if it's a town-sponsored charger, or it's a gas station like situation, or if you're a business who owns your parking spots and you're charging it as part of what's essentially still an accessory usage to your main business, right? Like, it
But this
is
talking
that the question? Like,
No.
It's talking about the principal use of
Principal
the
use
lot.
of a lot.
Right.
If you're looking at
I
E8,
know, but
But not a
but like,
landlord.
there's
Yeah.
ramifications.
Well, yeah. If a landlord has a parking lot and charges his tenants for the use of electric chargers in that lot, that is still an accessory use.
Okay, good. That checks off one.
Right, and the landlord's gonna police the parking in that area too, because I've been known to go for any open charger I can find, and, but if there's a sign that said you'll be towed,
Right, so my confusion is why we're worrying about this at all. If the only question is whether or not someone can buy a plot of land, put up 7 chargers, and charge people for it, should that not just be under the same requirements of the gas stations?
the reason we're talking about it is because that's what was in the Lebanon ordinance, which is what was taken first, and that's what we've been working from.
Right.
That was their language. So that's why we're talking about it. And the answer, and I guess the question is if we want to look towards the future,
This is more of a philosophical question for the town, not why is it there?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that like it doesn't necessarily need to be a gas station alley, but we also don't want it to be anywhere.
Right.
So like if we were gonna provide guidance, maybe it's not even our guidance to give, is I think what you're saying. Like it may be a planning board or some other. So the question is, is the absence of the highlighted text going to imply some kind of, it's okay or granting of it, or yeah. So I think what we're proposing is just to strike that whole highlighted section. But by removing the whole highlighted section, are people going to read it and say, oh, then I can put a charger anywhere?
Yeah,
Right.
As
Now-
an- as an accessory.
Can you exclude zoning? I mean, exclude not allowed in residential zone, not,
That's the other thing to do is to say explicitly that retail charging of electric vehicles is only allowed as a principal use in the following zones.
Like commercial zones, for example.
Right.
I mean, the other thing we could do, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to make a point also. I think the type of charger, I think, also affects your traffic
Yeah.
pattern significantly. So if you put in a bank of level 2 chargers hoping to serve overnight charging for renters, that's very different traffic profile than the level 3 chargers where people are coming in and out every 20 minutes. So I don't know if we need to, split these hairs, but I think it's an issue about what you want to do for a dedicated parking lot charger.
I mean, the other thing we could do is just leave it and then like recognize that maybe it has some flaws, but at least now it's constrained to this area,
Yeah.
right? And there's just questions we don't know the answers to.
Right.
And as we learn more, like we will be able to amend it.
Yeah.
But then at least there's no ambiguity. It's like, look, if you want to do a commercial lot for charging, it's in gas station alley.
I
If
think
you
you
wanna
can
change
fix
that-
it with one word. EV charging is only allowed as an accessory use, period.
retail.
No, like any EV charging is only allowed as an accessory use. Any.
so you don't want any level 3 charging?
No, that
Well-
includes any and all EV charging, only as an accessory use.
Right, so landlords could provide it for tenants, employers could provide it for employees. Those are
For
accessory
like,
units.
yeah, and they can charge or not, but it's only an accessory use,
So you couldn't have a standalone lot.
period. Yeah.
Just
Couldn't have a
for-
Tesla.
Right.
Why do
which-
you want to prohibit
Well,
that?
yeah, philosophically.
Even for a gas station, it would be an accessory use.
So the
Yeah,
gas,
Yeah, philosophically, I think we want to move away from having standalone parking lots, other than what the town has.
And this doesn't even worry about that. Right? If we're writing an ordinance just for how EV charging is done, you can only do it as an accessory use. And what defines an accessory use is completely based on the zoning you're already in. Boom.
It's an accessory use is basically something that you put on the property to support the primary use.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, I don't know if
that's,
it falls within that, but I wouldn't want my neighbor to start putting in a bunch of level 3 chargers
Certainly not.
and having.
well, I mean, residential zoning kind of means you can't run a full-time business out of your home
I don't know what it
anyway,
says
where
here.
people come and go. So,
Okay,
that-
so again,
that-
I said I don't know the implications. I would just want to be sure that we are not allowing if we only allow it as an accessory use.
Yeah,
right, at a certain point where people are coming to your house to like charge for money that they give you, all of a sudden you have a private business and you have to deal with the permitting of being a private business.
So I guess I have a question. If this is only as an accessory use, then you could not put in like a a level 3 charger complex down by Route 4 and Main Street.
You could
intersection.
theoretically, but that
But it's
is
not an
like the
accessory
perfect
use.
context for a variance.
But it's not an accessory use then.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a dedicated.
Yeah, and it would have, the first one, because here's the thing, we don't know exactly how that kind of an installation would work and how it would affect the town or the town electrical grid anyways. So it would need to be scrutinized pretty deeply anyways.
Why would it be affecting the town's grid? I don't follow that.
If you're using hundreds of kilowatts of power.
I mean, so they just put one in off that circle in Dover.
yeah.
They put in a Tesla 7-bay or
Yeah,
whatever.
12.
supercharger. I don't think they re-engineered the town's grid to do that. I mean, I think it's within.
They actually reconductored a line for it.
Yeah, so, but I mean,
They put in a whole new distribution line for it.
for that,
Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
But that's-
there has been some discussion on the part of the town with
Puts a
Eversource
ton of load
on
on
sizing,
substations.
making sure that we have sufficient electric power available for things like technology drive redevelopment and the proposed West Edge, which there's some doubt whether that is currently the case.
Having sized high-end
okay. Interesting.
DC chargers, the amount of amperage draw that it puts on a local distribution grid is not insignificant.
Okay.
So
That's
our local
interesting.
permitting is actually less of a worry than any individual developer's ability to supply that power in the first place and the amount of utility upgrades that it would require. So
Okay.
therefore, I think if we don't make it part of our ordinance at all, and if anyone wants to build an installation like that, they would have to apply for a special use permit and a variance. I think that's reasonable, especially if it would be the first of its kind.
So I don't disagree completely, but I mean, a likely scenario for me, we can argue over the timing, is that one of the gas stations closes, stops selling gas, and they just want to put in high-speed chargers. What we're saying is that they won't be allowed to do that because they won't be able to create a dedicated lot. Whereas if we just left the language that's there,
Ordinances are not set in stone. You can show you can show special circumstances and apply for a variance on an ordinance. And that would be exactly the situation for that. And then we could modify the ordinance post facto. Instead, what we're talking about is trying to figure out a way where we can regulate a type of business model that we haven't seen that like works in the real world
so
yet.
your proposal right now, just so I'm clear, is to strike the whole word, strike the highlight, change the word, to make it exclusive for accessory use.
Yeah, and, like I think if you start out with just making it accessory use, like the downside is like making our town slightly inhospitable to a possible development that we're not sure we would want in the first place anyway.
Well, I don't know, I've been dreaming this, eventually maybe it'll happen, but I think the Irving station, that's a site for a public-private,
If we need to change
Level
our
three.
ordinance because they come to us with a
But, yeah,
specific development proposal, that's reasonable, and
But
that
it-
happens all the time.
yeah. I don't want to stand in the way of moving this forward, but I think we really need to figure out a way to make what we're writing future-directed and inviting to bring in what we don't see yet, which is companies coming into Gasoline Alley and saying, we're going to put in some EV chargers. This will make it
I just think it's
something that's
much
just
more
one more
reasonable that the
step to
gas
have to go
stations we
through.
have already are gonna put in 3 chargers and keep their pumps.
It's possible, but then, if I'm understanding what you're saying, the charging would not really be an accessory use because they're in the business of a filling station serving customers.
You can still make a profit off of accessory use purposes. It's permitted as a gas station.
Yeah. Well, okay, I mean, I don't want to hold this up, but I just think it's slightly backward. I think we ought to figure out the words that say what we want for residential and businesses and come up with a way to avoid having commercial use for charging in non-commercial areas.
Well, it just sounds to me like we're trying to solve for 2035 when we should be solving for 2028.
What about this vacant lot, the old Cumberland Farms
Yeah.
convenience store?
What about it?
I mean,
It's been empty.
Why wouldn't we write it so that it's welcoming to level 3 chargers at that location?
So just,
Again, that's what a variance and a
But see,
special
but no,
use.
but I
like-
mean, you can't have an ordinance that then anticipates a variance. I mean, that's, I don't know.
Well, but you also don't want to put out an RFP for that property because that would be the way to actually invite a business to it. No business is going to, and I know this because I develop sites not based on what the local solar ordinances are. I look at the solar ordinances after I find good land and good wires. Like, no one's going to be looking around, going through ordinances, being like, oh, this one has, if I read in between the lines, an open space for me to develop. People are going to look for the ability to supply power, the availability of customers, i.e. EV owners, and land, and the cost of land.
So let's say developers.
Ordinance is not going to come into it at all.
If somebody's looking at the lead traffic circle or this property over here, right? Where do we want them to go? The lead traffic circle.
if we write it, I feel like there's 3 options.
I think
for-
that's too specific. I don't think that's the way things are targeted. Is my argument.
I think we're getting into an echo chamber a little bit. Like I think there's 3 options, just to lay them out, if I'm hearing it correctly. The way it's written today, with the highlight, so, the only place you can have retail charging is here in Gas Station Alley. That's option 1. Option 2, writing it the way that you suggested, which is 0 retail charging in the town, only accessory use.
No, that actually wasn't my suggestion.
What was your suggestion?
My suggestion was that accessory use only, but allow for people to have to buy the power.
That's already in the ordinance.
Yeah, that's fine.
E number 6.
I know, but you said accessory use only, no retail charging. I'm saying landlords can charge for electricity.
Primary use retail charging.
Okay, all right, sure.
Okay, so that's 2. What was the 3rd? So gas station only, no primary use retail charging, or we, Jack, to your point, like we spend some time and figure out language around, if commercial, okay, if not residential. Like those are kind of the 3 options that I see, right?
Although the first one, I think, does what you're calling the 3rd. So really it's 2, right?
Right, well.
Well, no, so the first one is saying only gas station alley. The 3rd would be saying any commercial property. Like we could write language that says any commercial property
Right.
in the town.
Yeah, and one thing that we would have the power to do is make it the sort of thing that would be allowed by special exception, meaning they would have to go before the ZBA to get the special exception.
Yeah, that's
and there
a
would be a
special use
public
permit.
hearing involved.
Yeah.
Right.
A special exception is the exact same thing.
That's option
Yeah,
2.
Use permit.
Right, that's option 2.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm not clear on why number 1 isn't number 3.
So gas station only.
Well, can you read, I'm sorry, it's just, I can't find Durham guest. It's not
So,
coming
well,
up.
I
so
mean, so
That'll teach me to
as
save
it's
paper.
stated now, it says EV charging stations are allowed as an accessory use in all zoning districts, period. When the retail charging of electric vehicles is proposed to be the principal use of a lot, then the proposed EV charging station shall be considered an automotive service station for zoning purposes.
Okay.
And the
Which for our
practical
purposes
application of
is-
that
Right now,
is
right.
courtyard
But I
only,
mean, it
courthouse
seems to
only.
me to me that works.
Yeah.
That's our place where you have coming and going all day, hours of the
Okay,
day.
yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, to me, that's.
Great. So
Yeah.
so we're good with the current language?
So to me, that's yes. To me,
Yeah.
that's an entry
Awesome.
point. And then, tweaks that we need to make in the future. I mean,
Right.
I
right.
can see, there's probably issues with it, right? But I just think we could spend a lot of time
Right.
circling.
Right, and this language does provide us with some degree of future-proofing as gas stations stop selling gas.
It would allow this alley to transition, right?
Yes.
And if somebody wanted a separate commercial area that's not here, they could take your path, Matthias, and they could
Right,
submit
right.
for a special ordinance.
Right, and speaking specifically to former Cumberland Farms convenience store, that would, it would be viable to develop that as an EV charging lot where almost nothing else would be viable on the site.
I mean, this may seem frustrating. I can tell you're frustrated. To me, I started this conversation saying, hey, I think charging should be able to be done beyond just gas station alley. But this conversation helped me kind of narrow in and like, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the traffic flows. So it helped me narrow back it and agree again with the
So for instance, if the Mill Road Plaza wants to provide EV charging stations for customers, that's an accessory use and would be allowed under this ordinance.
Exactly. Just like Tideline, although they're probably in the gas station alley corridor.
Although they give their electricity away, don't they?
No, you have to. There's an app for it.
I just plug in.
I plug in, but it doesn't do anything until you.
Oh, you have to go inside and get it like a
No, you
toilet?
like text them and you get a. I've never gotten actual energy until I've gone through the app and paid for it.
Oh, there's no signage, is
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Okay.
Move on to D.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you good? Yeah, sorry. Oh, that was the first highlighted spot.
There's more. So if you go to D, I highlighted the sentence under number 1 because I did what everybody asked last time, which was to move the chart to the end of that section. So I added the verbiage that says Article 10.1 chart is shown below for convenience with an added column to the right illustrating applicability of this ordinance. So that was new verbiage. So if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Then number D2 is clarifying the point that was discussed last time and that people came back to that say, single-family duplex dwellings, this ordinance applies to these dwelling types in the following circumstances. A, an EV prepared spot shall be provided when one per dwelling in new construction, so new house or new duplex. And B, it's required, an EV prepared spot shall be provided when the surface entrance panel is being replaced. And that's what we had gone through and agreed to last time. So, people okay with that?
I'm fine, for the record, for everything as it has been modified.
Okay, well, I'm just.
But
I put them in writing.
What I want to do is ask how many people have heard all of the modifications and have read all of the modifications.
I haven't.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure this is the right exercise.
So we can just plow through it. Under 5, in that section, that this is the original note that was put in from Emily, I think, when she did the thing from Lebanon, was note 7. Should we include something like this to lessen parking requirements if you include chargers as Lebanon has done, where for every 2 EV installed spots, in addition to the required minimum, counted as 4 off-street parking spots related to Durham Plan regulation, parking circulation standards. So we get into the bonus scene of reducing parking space requirements if you put in more EV chargers. Do we want to tackle that as part of this or not?
I think in general, anything that reduces minimum parking requirements is a good thing. Minimum parking requirements tend to be sized for peaks that I'm not sure we ever see. I mean, when's the last time you drove into the Mill Road Plaza and failed to find a parking space?
So the purpose of her suggestion is a carrot, essentially, right? So like, hey, put in 2 EV chargers and you can cut your spaces in half. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. Two EVSE installed spots
In addition to the minimum,
count for purposes of parking requirements is 4 spaces
over the minimum requirement that we're putting in.
above the minimum requirement.
What would the motivation for somebody putting in spots beyond the minimum?
They don't have to provide as much parking, and so it's less
Yeah.
expensive for them to maintain their parking lot.
Maybe they're trying to squeeze something in square footage wise that it doesn't work if I've got to have.
No, maybe I'm misunderstanding. So if the minimum, if I have to install 4 spots, and then I can install.
6, and I can reduce the total count of my parking spaces by 2.
Okay, all right, I'm with you now. Okay.
fine by me. Leave it that way? Everybody okay?
This came from Lebanon?
Apparently. Looks like it. So-
Yeah, I mean, I don't know,
Well, it does provide an incentive for a developer instead of just a burden. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a trade-off.
yeah. This is the carrot to go
Yeah.
along with the stick.
Yeah.
Okay, so bring that up. Number 8,
Okay, this was relevant to an earlier discussion about regarding planning board that if we give the planning board authority to revise the requirements based on verifiable information pertaining to parking, and again, the parking, the planning board does have discretion to modify or waive site plan requirements if an applicant requests this. So this is just making it explicit that the EV requirements are one of the things that the planning board has the authority to modify if they believe it to be justified.
sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay? So we'll leave that in and just clean up the bottom wording there, okay?
What, so, sorry, Mike, consider incorporating some flexibility. So is that coming from Emily? Like, who's coming?
Well, that's the parenthetical part, I'll just take that out.
No, but
Right,
what-
It was an explanation of why it's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for final wording, we don't need that.
No, of course. I understand why you
Right,
take it
yeah.
out, but, so bullet 8 exists to accomplish the parentheses.
Right.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure I was reading it correctly.
Give the planning board a little wiggle room.
Got it.
Okay. Then it goes to the chart, which was the other question that was outstanding from last time, which is in terms of what I said was that in some of the categories of type of use, the number of parking spaces now is dictated by square footage. We had a big discussion on this last time, so let's not to rehash it. But some are set by number of employees, some are set by square footage, a couple by other things. But the question was, is some of these uses, if you looked at them, and that's what I liked about the chart, was it sort of forced you to go through them and actually say, okay, what about this? It's like, does it make sense or it doesn't make sense? There's a couple that maybe would be better off. So the restaurants over 4,000 square foot we talked about, banks and financial, professional offices where people are in and out. So I asked Michael if they routinely get an employee count within the application for site plan approval. He said no. He says we do for some now, as you can see. But he said it's not a problem if you want to make it an ordinance or regulation, then they just have to supply it. So he didn't see a problem with it, it seems like, so. If we want to do that. And it goes back to the issue of not requiring more things than you need based upon the use of this space.
So we would be asking them to revise a separate ordinance to,
No,
No.
this was intended to, putting the table in, which
right,
was meant to simplify people
Right.
understanding. So
Yeah.
when they looked at site plan regulations, they had all these uses. It's like, okay, for rooming or boarding houses, I need to have one space per resident. What part of this ordinance applies?
Mhm.
And it tells you, it's D3. So go back to D3 and that's what you got to do the multiplication with. So it's just meant to point specifically for each of these uses to what applies. And in doing that, in my mind, when I went through them and started to look at them one by one, some of them didn't make sense. Like the restaurant was the one that stood out the most, but banks. There's a couple of Bank of Americas around. You go to the Bank of America in Portsmouth. There's this big, huge office space with whatever. So somebody builds a bank that looks like it's a big place, but there's like 2 employees, maybe 3.
right.
Who's going to use the charger when they go into the bank? They're in and out in like 5 or 6 minutes. So
So the suggestion for restaurants over 4,000 square feet is instead of using square footage,
Employee
use
count.
employee count, which we have not yet determined yet.
Well, we did. So in D3, I think,
D3.
actually does that. So What am I, maybe it's not D3,
D4,
D4, non-residential.
non-residential uses.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it there. Okay, so then you would just strike the square footage requirement.
Right. I mean, I'd have to go back and rethink these, but basically I'm just bringing the message from Michael that it was like, yeah, if you wanted to do that, he didn't see a problem with proposing it that way.
Okay.
So we have that flexibility if we want to. And this is one that I think bears maybe a subcommittee going through these things one by one and hashing through them so that everybody kind of thinks through what the implications are, rather than necessarily trying to hash through this with the whole committee right now. But just, you have that flexibility. And then E, which I mentioned last time, was sort of largely taken from the Southern Maine Regional Planning model standard in terms of the verbiage in there. You saw this last time, but I modified a few things, and that's what's highlighted. So per the discussion that took place last time, and I think whose suggestion it was, about the power cord connectors, it might have been Steve, I guess. So E2B now has a sentence added at the end about power cord connector plug technology has been evolving with charging standards. Verify the proper type. Footnote. And then number 3 below that, I did put language in it. Before it just said about insert here any of the recommendations of the fire chief. So I did some more research on some of these things from a couple of other model things and put these in as a beginning list of considerations that are just being put out there for people to consider. So the applicant and the planning board would consider distance from the power panel. You can read the stuff. Ability to expand the charging station. Does everybody have a copy in front of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, have you had a chance to discuss this one with the fire chief?
No, and I almost was tempted last night to catch him as he was going out, but I think from my last comment, you said last time.
I think we need to defer discussion of this one until you've had that conversation.
Right. Well, I think you said let's get through this next draft and then we'll send it out to people for their comments, so. And that was it. The last highlights was just highlighting where the purpose language came from so that you could see the actual language from the state EV Commission's final report.
So,
And there is a
sorry,
typo.
Mike, you beat me to this. Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry,
Were you going to talk about lighting?
No, I wasn't. I was going to just, on the level 3 DCFS, the only, kind of going back to our earlier discussion, the only place that could exist, given this writing, is on gas station alley. Is that a true statement?
Under our current zoning ordinance, yes.
Under our current zoning ordinance?
Why couldn't it be used as an accessory?
Well, if it's an accessory use, then yeah, it explicitly says that it's allowed in all zones. Of course, it would also have to be compatible with other requirements, so that's what would preclude a resident setting up a charging system that third parties paid for.
But
I guess I was
the
just
Hannafords,
thinking-
as you were saying earlier, if somebody wanted to plunk in a couple of Tesla chargers in there,
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So the fire, sorry.
So basically, if it's a landlord providing it for tenants or a condo association providing it for residents or a business providing it for employees or the Mill Road Plaza providing it for customers, those are all accessory uses, and I don't think any of us have any objection to that.
Okay, so I just,
The issue is where the charging station is the primary use of the property.
I just, when I read it, I was just thinking if I was the fire commissioner, I'd be like, oh, where are these level 3 DCFS going to be? And the truth is, we don't know. It could be anywhere. Right. It could be anywhere accessory use.
Right.
It can only be in gas station alley primary use. So
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Jack.
No, it's okay. I wanted to move to number 5, lighting. So this says site lighting shall be provided where EBCS is installed. I'm a little concerned about that because already I think Durham has too much lighting. Being a dark sky kind of guy. And, you know, I can imagine multifamily homes, residences where the parking lot has a couple of chargers. Does that mean they're going to have all-night lighting?
Oh, okay. Maybe we say in non-residential areas. So
Yeah,
exclude
I
it for
mean-
your house,
Yeah,
but if you otherwise are in commercial space, I mean, I think you'd want at least a light on the top of the charger so you can see what you're doing. And you also don't want people tripping over cords.
Well,
Makes
you want
sense.
people to feel safe also.
yeah. No, I mean, but I think
Right, yeah.
in residential zones, more lights, to me,
Right.
we should find a way around it. Like when you pull in, maybe the charging station has some low-level lighting or something, but putting more streetlights in, I think, is too bad.
Well, yeah, no, I would agree, we don't want this in residential areas. It's presumably that would be for the, for overnight charging by the residents or their guests. And so there wouldn't really be a need for lighting on it because it's only being used by people who have reason to be on the property anyway. It makes more sense for commercial uses to have lighting requirements to the extent that it's used at night. There may be, we may want to put in a subject to other restrictions provided in the ordinances. That would cover things like a gasoline alley. If you ever drive there after a certain time at night, you'll notice that the signs with the gasoline prices are not illuminated. And I think we would not want to override any of those ordinances.
Jack, is your proposal just to strike number 5 completely?
I'm sorry?
Is your proposal to just strike number 5 completely? Like, just don't mention lighting?
Yeah, no, I'm bringing it up for discussion. I don't know if I have a complete opinion.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, I guess I would say let's strike it.
Yeah,
Right, or
I think, why are we requiring lighting?
Or if we keep it, we should clarify that it,
Yeah.
that it applies only to commercial uses
Yeah.
with EV parking spaces.
Right.
Have people discussed motion sensor-based lighting for that purpose? Or is that not?
That discussion
accepted.
came up with some of the projects that were proposed at the planning board.
But it's probably a very specific, like if we were gonna add that here, it'd probably be really specific, right? Like you have to have this kind of lighting? Or is that,
Well, most of the lights that transition to LEDs could be converted to have motion sensor activation. But, I mean, I've been through parking lots where it doesn't look like it's lit, and then you walk into the parking lot and, you know, they light up as you, you know, so it kind of helps address some of the night sky issues without providing an unsafe
Yeah.
environment. I don't know if we've had any experience with that in this area or not. I mean, we don't need to put it into this
Yeah,
document.
it seems to me we don't need a lighting part of the ordinance. It seems like people might think about liability when they put it up,
Right.
and if you're a business owner,
Right.
you think, okay, I'm gonna have to light this because I don't want a lawsuit and somebody tripping on the wire.
So is
Or that we could even just reduce this to, to basically the last sentence of that paragraph, lighting standards must at minimum meet applicable site plan requirements.
Good.
Which may be redundant because
it's required.
It's
required anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's-
With
strike
maybe
it.
clarification that this applies specifically to EVSCs.
I'm kind of with Jack, I don't know that it needs to be here personally.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be struck and not have any major impact.
Make a motion to all in favor of this, and striking the whole thing?
Strike it.
Oh, everybody good with that? Just
Yeah.
take it out? Okay.
Good.
And the last thing I'd just point out as a technical matter, sort of, under the purpose, A, the third paragraph down, I realized, read this, there's a typo in there, so that sort of makes a nonsensical sentence. It says, this ordinance establishes minimum requirements for such infrastructure necessary to serve both long-term and short-term EV charging. It says, while parking needs, and identifies where such. I think we strike while parking needs. So just long and short-term EV charging and identifies where such infrastructure is permitted. They snuck in somehow.
Yeah, that was probably a leftover from some earlier edit.
Yeah. So that's all the things that were there, unless there's any other items. It comes down to the nitty-gritty then of the Article 10.1 and the specific uses and how many spaces to require for some of the uses that are based on square footage that we might want to do based on employee count.
And you were saying you were going to have another subcommittee meeting for
I
that?
was just suggesting that that might be the way, because it also addresses what Mike Klein was talking about earlier, which is going through these things with some model examples to sort of test how these things would apply and make sure we don't have something that we haven't.
And it would probably be useful to talk to somebody on the planning board and see if they're thinking of modifying these the existing parking requirements, and make sure that what we're doing is compatible with their plans. Is that the planning board is in the middle of a massive zoning rewrite project, so.
Talk to Michael about that. He would be able to answer that for the planning board. probably.
Yeah, talk to Michael Barron about that. Talk to Paul Rasmussen and see what he's thinking about it.
I thought that was the step after we came up with the ordinance we wanted.
Well, yeah. I mean, once we approve this ordinance to be sent to the planning board, it would come before them. But it would probably be a good idea in general to be communicating with Paul about this.
Yeah, when I spoke with Michael, I hadn't sent him a copy because I didn't want to bog him down the details. I told him you'll be getting a copy, but we're just trying to get to that point. But yeah, I agree. Okay. I mean, I can do that part, but I do think that there should be a little work group that will test out.
Is
all
there a
numbers.
subcommittee working on this already? Or I know we've got a subcommittee,
Well,
but that's more
That was the
outreach.
outreach stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So, well, I think M was working before with Steve, right? Were you and M working on this originally?
No, it was
No.
Ty, Em, and I.
No.
I think I was part of that.
And you were there
Yeah,
too.
that's right. Okay, well, I'll pony up,
Do you want to?
run some numbers.
We're gonna-
I mean, we had talked about doing a backward compatibility,
Right.
looking at recent building permits to see how many,
We had, but we wanted to get this together so that the next step would be, based upon the discussion last time,
yeah.
that once we got this thing pretty much where we're all in agreement, then we would send it to the Michael, Director of Planning, and to the building department, so
Okay.
that Audrey could look at it, get their feedback, and she could sort of give us,
Right.
based upon past year or so, how this would have worked, or if there'll be a problem that she sees, or could see. So I think we're
Sounds
almost
good.
there, but I think we
Yeah.
get the work group going and hammer the numbers, then,
Specifically for the work group is work the percentages, come up with some models, right? Like what if scenarios. Was there, and then your table. The square footage or employee count basis, right?
and to Eric's point, I can try and reach out to these two folks quickly to make sure that they have basically okay with the idea of us incorporating a table like this, and there's no big changes coming down the road. And then when the work group meets, they can not spend an hour and a half doing something that isn't gonna work.
Yeah, sounds good. Nice. Thanks for taking us through that.
Sound like a plan? And you're gonna organize the work group?
I am?
Are
Okay,
you?
remind me again.
Were you
I
volunteering
think
a minute
you
ago?
should probably organize it, considering.
Well, tell me again, it's M, is she still on it, Emily?
Yeah, well, I talked to Em last night, and she, lamented the fact she couldn't be here tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I assume she still wants to be.
So it would be the
interested.
group of us who met back in January or whenever, right? So that was, you were part of that one too, so. and-
I don't think I'm going to participate in this one.
No? Okay. So who else? Steve?
I was
You're
Ty.
part of it?
Ty.
Gonna be a part of
I
it.
think I'm happy to be part of it.
Ty?
Um,
And did you say you were part of it?
I wasn't, but I'm happy to participate.
Would you be? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll send out an email.
Yeah, just make sure that the.
Below quorum.
Yeah, it's below quorum.
Yeah.
So that's what, 4, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, maximum of 4.
Okay, I'll send out an email to the 3 others and to work on this.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. I said sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
So with that, do you have any CBCNH updates for us this month?
Yeah, just a brief, I didn't send out anything in advance, but this was, the annual meeting was last month, and at the annual meeting, they have elections for the officers of the board. And so the board is 20, they're electing a third of it every year. So I had one of the seats that was just a one-year term, so it and 7 others were up for renewal. They had 7 candidates for 7 seats, so it wasn't too hard. I got reelected. So now I have a 3-year term on the board, so Durham will have at least representation on the board for 3 years. At
great.
least. And we're looking at trying to get representation around the state on the board so that we fit in nicely with that too, so it's all good. They announced they had now 58 member communities representing 35% of the New Hampshire population. They're not all on power, but they're all members so far in various stages of implementation. So 35% of the New Hampshire population. So that's pretty amazing. The statistics to date for overall opt-out is 1%. So people are sticking with the program. There's no large-scale defections where people want to leave the program. And the opt-in percentage is about 2%. So I think those are both good numbers. They have a regulatory and legislative committee which has been tracking all these crazy bills that come in with every legislative session. Picking out ones that are bad news and alerting people to vote against them, and ones that they are championing. They also send out information for us to support.
Right, a couple of those were discussed at the council meeting last night.
Right.
1623.
1600 was, I know, one that I heard about. There may be others as well.
Right.
But, yeah.
1600 was one of the ones we discussed, and that's one of the ones that we should support. 1623 is a really bad one. It's
Yeah.
basically it's basically an attempt to favor fixed load generation within the boundaries of New Hampshire, to the extent that companies that own such plants would not be allowed to shut them down without PUC's permission, even if nobody's buying power from those
From the
plants.
coal plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's useful, it sounds like there's already channels of communication along that kind of legislative stuff that comes in to the council. Otherwise, if it's useful for me to bring that kind of stuff to this committee, I can do that as well.
I get it
But-
direct from them. I don't know if it's because I'm Like I get it
You get it
straight-
direct from clean, if you're on Clean Energy
Clean
New
Energy
Hampshire.
sends it.
If you're on a Clean Energy
Oh,
New
maybe that's what it
Hampshire
Yeah.
distribution, you'll get this kind of stuff.
I
So-
would find it helpful just getting your commentary on these things though, because I went and tried to work through the bill and, I saw a lot that I didn't like, but I tend to be critical anyway. And, if we're being asked to write, a persuasive letter, and it would be helpful if you have any thoughts on these things.
So, and just to be clear, I got it from CPCNH. Like
Okay,
they send
yeah.
it directly out, support HB 1600. I don't know why I'm getting that. I don't know if every resident's getting that.
No, we gave,
I'm
we
fine
gave
getting
them
it.
the
Okay.
email addresses for the committee.
Okay, good.
So
Okay,
you
yeah.
hypothetically should get them. But it would be helpful for me if energy-related bills that this group felt were important enough to Durham to weigh in on, if we talked about it here.
Okay.
Because I'm inundated with crisis communications on
Right.
bills of all shapes and sizes, and I don't have the bandwidth to track them all or really analyze them all. So last night at the council meeting, both HB 1600 and 1623 were brought up. Em brought them up, and I indicated I'd write a letter supporting 1600, against 1623, and I've got a good draft going. If there's anything we want to include tonight, I can include it. Otherwise, I'm sort of taking the talking points off of Clean Energy New Hampshire and CPCNH,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm happy to make a note of that for the future.
Yeah.
As things get highlighted. Sometimes they have write-ups that are, more than just a sentence or two
Yeah.
that might help what you're saying. And the other thing that's confusing to me is these things go through committees and they get amended, so now you're for it, now you're against it because the amendment, it's very hard to keep track of this unless that's your full-time job, so, which it's not for me. We also have been talking with several other Seacoast communities about having an opt-up campaign, and I think people are kind of ready to maybe do that. I was trying to get the statistics that we can use to score that available to us, and I'm having trouble getting that stuff available. I kind of didn't want to kick this off unless we know how we can keep track of things. So, but I think there's 4 or 5, I think, communities that have expressed interest, so that'll be kind of a little friendly competition to
Yeah.
get opt-up
it's like
customers.
Portsmouth, Stratham, Dover,
Mhm.
us. I forget who else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it should be, hopefully it'll be an incentive that'll be maybe kind of fun. So that's all I had from the CPCNH.
Awesome. I'm going to play my normal role. Is there any, just given the time, and looking at the rest of the agenda, what else do you have? Is there anything on there that's needs to be discussed tonight? Or can we table?
We might have Aaron on.
I want to give
Oh my
Aaron the
gosh.
opportunity
That's the only
to
thing.
speak, but other than that, I'm fine.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh my goodness, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you, Aaron, as always.
No worries.
Hopefully,
Yeah, I'm gonna keep the camera off. I've got a face for radio this evening. But, just wanted to very quickly update you all on the EV survey, if you have a minute.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. So I literally just sent you all the updated version of the survey. It's pretty much done, but obviously, if you have any final edits you'd like me to make, I'll be here through, I think, the 27th of this month, so I'm happy to make those changes. I did submit the version with all of your feedback, so thank you for providing that, and submitted that to my professor who runs Indiana University's survey department, so she made some final edits of her own, and so that's what's reflected in what I just shared with you. And I thought to make it a little easier, I put all the questions in a Google Doc, so you don't have to like flip through the survey, try to see them all. You can just look at that Google Doc, and it should all just be there for you to peruse at your leisure. And yeah, it's currently in a UNH Qualtrics account. So theoretically, you can always redo it, in future years, as long as that UNH staff members still around. If not, we'll just move it to a different account. But it's designed so that you can do it on an annual basis, biannual basis, however often you want to do it. So,
Excellent.
yeah. It's ready when you are.
Thank you.
No problem.
Aaron, what's the next steps to send it? When you say when we're ready when we are, is it just like, do we send it or do you send it? Who actually sends it?
Well, it depends on how you want to go about it. I think probably putting it in the Friday updates would be a good way to start getting it out there, and any social media you may have.
Okay.
If you want to get student feedback, I think the UNH Sustainability Office said they have people willing to send it around. So it's just a question of when you want to do it. The only thing with the students is that, they probably won't be here in the summer, so you might have a lower response rate if you only do it now, for instance. But depends on how often you want to do it and for how long you want to keep the survey open.
Yeah, I was thinking we could use it as a way to regularly acquire data for how the town's feeling. So to me, it makes sense to put it out in the summer, get a lot of responses that we know are mostly going to be townspeople, reissue it during the school year, see how that changes, and then if you do those 2 cycles yearly, then you can start tracking how ideas are changing over time. So I think it's something that's very repeatable. So I'd rather try and put it out as often as we can without getting too much response fatigue. But I don't know what you guys think.
No, I think it's good. My question, because it sounds like, Aaron, you're leaving soon, right? Did I hear
Yes, you'll be getting a new fellow at the end of the month. That's right.
So I just want to make sure that somebody on the committee has the ball, essentially, right? So like, who's Aaron passing it to is really my question. Because then we have to send it out and kind of get, get
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron. I think part of it's you're passing it on to the next
That's
fellow,
right.
Oh,
The next fellow, her name is Sophie, you'll be meeting her at the next Energy Committee meeting in June. And I've also provided a code book for her and any other, future fellows, so they know how to clean the data, so that, if you are doing it over many years, everyone's analyzing it in the exact same way, so you can compare and contrast,
nice.
across your different, survey sessions that you want to do. And then I also have a template available for displaying the data. So again, that's consistent over years. So that's something that she will receive along with the login info for the Qualtrics account. So if there are any changes that need to be made, she could always do that.
And Aaron, is Alexis Dwyer kind of the your primary contact in the sustainability fellows?
Jen Andrews.
Jen, okay.
Yes.
So we'll go to Jen if we need to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually her Qualtrics account. So as long as Jen's there, you're good.
That's good to know.
They don't come
Yeah.
cheap, do they?
Aaron, I have a question also.
Sure.
Since you've been so heavily involved in this process and studying surveys, do you have, or would you maybe, please, draft the language that would be the introductory language that could be put into Friday Update in terms of introducing the survey, the reason why, so things that might help make it easy for people to use, like this will only take you 3 minutes. Well, it takes you 6 minutes,
Yes.
but.
Yes, so, sorry, I should have said this. I already have that drafted. It's in a really short report that I can always share with folks if they'd like to see it, along with the process, the research that went into it, and then suggestions for actually administering the survey, although obviously you do not have to abide by those. It's just, I needed to do it for class, so I just came up with a possible process. So all of that has been written. I also came up with a little flyer if you do end up having funding for a flyer that would have the QR code that leads to the survey that folks could do.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for doing this project.
Yeah.
And was this helpful for you? Was this a good educational experience for you?
It was very helpful, and I think the class was very impressed with the survey, because they've never seen a survey like this before, and I think it's a great way to actually solicit feedback from the community to see what are the challenges they're facing with EVs, what's holding them back from purchasing an EV. I think you'll get some good data from it, for sure.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Is this, Erin, is this our last meeting with you then?
It is, yes it is. Yeah, you'll be seeing Sophie next month.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Best of luck
Thank you.
on whatever's next
Thank
for
you
you.
very much.
How did you
Appreciate
stay
it.
awake all this time waiting to be brought on?
I've just been eating dinner, enjoying the show.
The other thing Aaron's been working on with me is looking into a canopy solar array at the Amtrak depot. So she and I are still going to be looking into that a little bit, and
Right.
we'll probably pass that down to
Is that
her.
Is that like a trial site or something, or is this a full installation? When you say canopy, it's not the brand name canopy,
Parking canopy.
parking canopy. Okay,
Yeah,
like a
so,
structure.
you've got that long parking lot by the
Right.
train tracks.
Right, okay,
Town owns it, it's a brownfield site, there's
okay.
contamination underneath. But there's reasonable opportunity to make all of that a solar canopy. And so what Aaron and I have been looking into is seeing if there's any interest in developers out there. Obviously not my company for conflict of interest reasons, but we've been looking to see if there's a way for the town to municipally sponsor a local array like that to add to the green offset.
We should coordinate together. I've been in contact with the Department of Environmental Services and the Transportation Department, and they're applying jointly for a grant. They're calling it community charging, and we had very short notice, but they asked us to propose a bunch of space in our town. Whether or not we've got approval, just what are some ideas they could float with their proposal, and that was one of them, that lot.
Charging?
Charging, yeah. So, there might be some money from this project if it goes through.
Yeah, send me what you're working on with that.
Well, I have nothing except to report that it's called the Charging Fueling Infrastructure Program, CFI. And they're looking for two types of site. They've got two programs going. One is called Community and the other is Corridor. And we've already been through the corridor issue. You have to be within 1 mile of all the roads. But Community, they're looking for places exactly like that, near a train station, near a downtown, etc. So.
And what are they providing? I didn't catch that.
We heard about this and had 3 days to put together between UNH and me, just to come up with some ideas. They've put together a list of, I think Durham has 5 or 6 sites, maybe more with UNH, but then 10
is
other
this
towns.
grant money? Is this incentive money? Is this tax money?
I know nothing. This is the problem. We hear about these things, they say, quick, come up with a proposal, we name some names, and then it sits. So I wrote them today and asked, what's the status? And I at least got a copy of the places that they proposed be considered. But I don't know what the structure would be in terms of funding. It sounds like they want level 2, no fewer than 4 level 2 chargers, and possibly level 3.
Well, without knowing what any of the terms or conditions are, what money we
Welcome
get
to what-
from it. Yeah.
But it might be worth, if I had known about this, I would have mentioned to Colin Firth that, the planning discussion, because that might give us a higher priority in their funding. So, if there's already something happening with the potential solar array above, that would be, I think, quite appealing.
Yeah, send me that information. I'll see if it makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm also putting together a list of incentives, federal and state incentives, as well as a list of potential partners who could,
Yeah.
maybe offset some of the cost as well. So that's something you'll also receive.
Great, that's good.
First things first is identifying the site viability and the overall financial viability. But it's looking all right so far. Early days. I just got a friend of mine to do a design a little while ago, and Aaron and I have been playing phone tag with a couple of developers, so it's early on. But I mean, that site, to reassure you, it's like, if we're gonna put solar there, we gotta put in more than 4 level 2 chargers. Like,
Oh, sure. Well,
we gotta have like 16 in a row there, right?
Some fast chargers for the.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
One,
Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
one last thing, just as a reminder for everybody.
And I did promise Emily I would read in some notes she sent me into the record, so I'm sorry to burst your bubble. You had some.
At the next meeting, we'll have a short window before Durham Days, and we had talked previously about doing a table, which Parks and Rec will provide for us in the downtown area. And we will just need a couple or a few volunteers to sort of man that, and that might be the opportunity we also talked about earlier about maybe that's the time to push the opt-up.
Oh, yeah.
That could be a good enough.
So
yeah.
just sort of not lose sight of that.
So we have one table?
I think we could have 1 or 2, but she said, yes, they could give us a couple of tables if
Gotcha.
we want them. I said, you know, maybe one like an 8-foot table or a couple small ones, whatever, would probably be enough for a couple people to stand behind.
Was it Emily who made that poster about heat pumps?
Yeah.
I liked that.
It was good.
That was pretty good.
All right, read fast.
Yeah, I'll read like the 5 paragraphs she sent me ASAP.
Can you just email it?
Yeah, could it just be email? Yeah, like,
Why do we have to read it?
Yeah.
Does she
Should I
email
just
stuff to-
BCC it to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. In that case, I'm good if you guys are good.
All in favor?
all right.
Cheers, everybody.
Nice.